could you try doing spirals instead of closing the shapes? We're going to try this with Japanese watercolors and inspired by a Japanese Zen garden. The entire blank page is our garden, with the edges being the limits. We're going to start by placing little rocks around our garden. They're each going to be a little bit of a different shape, and we're going to dot them around randomly. They're going to serve as the little areas that will cause change in our pattern. We're starting our spiral in the very center of our garden. Our paintbrush is our rake, and it's going to consistently spiral around itself until we completely fill out the space with pattern. When the spiral comes in contact with one of our rocks, it's going to change direction. The rock is a natural place in which we're going to change our path, and we're simply going to move around it, following the contours of that specific rock with patience, focus, and intention. Once the rock has been swallowed up, we return to our original spiral until we hit our next rock. We then welcome this rock into our spiral too, by painting carefully around the edge and bringing it into this ever-growing spiral shape. As we move along the textured grain of the handmade paper, we think about the organic textures of a garden in nature. We're going to move along this surface by going along with what comes up and flowing through it effortlessly, as opposed to fighting it or getting frustrated that it isn't smooth. Our intention isn't to be 100% smooth and perfect. We are a human, which is a lovely thing to be. The bumpy little differences make us unique, and our consciousness allows us to pay attention to the shapes that are forming, and think of what other shapes they might look like abstract versions of. Right now, I see a cross-section of a tree trunk. I also see growing mushrooms, and the face of a bear, where the spiral is her nose. Our shape is slowly but surely growing outwards, and expanding into all uncharted territories of the garden. Every rock we come across creates a new ripple effect in this pattern. The differences in shape, like this divot right here, are the entire point of the piece. We're not trying to paint an image of something. We are trying to give our mind a visual guide to pay attention to, so that all the background noise we don't need right now can fall away, and we can give ourselves some moments of peace. In this slow pace, lo-fi vibration, smaller, unassuming details are what become exciting. Here we get to rake along a lovely ripple, which feels smooth like a very calm wave gently coming to the shore. With each go around the spiral, the shape of the layers transform. This is because they're directly responding to the line before them, which is responding directly to the line before them, and so on, until we get right back to the starting spiral in the very center of the page. Since the little divots, waves, and imperfections are what we're tuning our focus to as we create this piece, we can't mess up, which works out great. If the whole point is to play with change and variation, anything under that umbrella is welcomed, and it contributes to be an exciting swoosh for our rake. Even if the lines were to touch, that's just something we would seamlessly move around, for it would be part of the piece. That could be an area of richness, passion, or magnetization, where those two lines just had to get together. Our garden is expanding really beautifully, and it's about to hit the boundary on two sides. Once this happens, our spiral is going to be split up, but it's okay. We then have two new sections to work on independently of each other. Instead of going round and round in a circular way like we've been doing, our rake is going to move across the page from left to right at the top and the bottom. What stays the same is that every time we come in contact with a rock, we'll welcome her into the ever-growing pattern of our garden. Effectively, we're now drawing straight lines across the page. Once we get to the end, we'll start a new one. Although instead of being a flat horizon like you'd see if you were at the beach, looking at where the ocean meets the sky, there are shapes breaking it up, which give it some intrigue. On that ocean horizon, the shape might be the sail of a boat. It also might be a bird diving into the water and breaking the still horizon line. In our Zen garden, these breaks are the rocks and the contours of our previous line. And we're just going to keep tracing whatever shape it is with each layer. We're not judging the shape. It's not too big or too wobbly or too straight. It just is. If we detach ourselves from wanting a certain outcome, we can't be disappointed. We can only be excited to see what emerges and what we have created. If you're sitting here anxiously just worried about if the lines are going to touch or not, you're not relaxing. That defeats the whole purpose of why you're here. If it makes you feel better, I promise they're not going to touch. Although even if they did, it would be okay. Try letting go of that worry for the rest of the painting. What our goal is here is to remove our static buildup. When a computer has too much energy, it can't function properly. And 9 times out of 10, what fixes that situation is simply unplugging it and plugging it back in. A little reset. It's necessary sometimes. That's what we're doing right now. Don't rob yourself of this time by worrying. You're more than welcome to worry again as much as you like once this video is done. Just try it with me. Our spiral has now swallowed the final rock in this section of the garden, and that brings a great lollop to our layer, which means our final blank space has been divided into 2. And we're going to zip them up with some final little lines. So pretty. Compared to the previous section we just closed out, all this blank space looks very inviting and freeing. It's the perfect place for our rake to dance around and enjoy being in this garden. The way the line patterns emerge based on the shape of the rocks reminds me of when you throw a pebble into the water, and all of the soft ripples dissipate around it. No one's looking at one specific ripple and pointing out its flaws. It doesn't have flaws. It's a ripple in water because a pebble disrupted the surface. It just is. This also reminds me of rainfall. When the rain droplets hit puddles, they have a similar look. It's pretty to watch the aftermath of how each droplet's ripples interact with each other. From one perspective, they're all delicately bumping into each other. From another perspective, it's a big image of interacting circles that is constantly changing with every little plop. Neither is right or wrong, it's just 2 different ways to look at it. 2 truths can be true. Our garden is really expanding. This sole rock that hasn't been swallowed up into the main spiral looks very tranquil. The good thing is it's not going anywhere, so we can take our time raking our layers and growing outward into the negative space. It's all about the process and the peace we can bring ourselves between each little layer. Think about how you felt when you scrolled onto this video, and think of how you're currently feeling now that we've almost completed our Zen garden. Is there any difference? Do you feel slower or faster? Do you have more gratitude? Or do you feel ready to tackle what's next in your day? Or do you feel something totally different? Or both? Now that it's time to come out of our meditation, we can get a bird's eye view of our spiral. Look at how it moves all the way around the page, undulating with every rock, and with all these different areas of ripples. Well done for slowing down enough to notice. I feel like we haven't done a juicy watercolor Zen Tangle in a while. So here's one. We're going to use the Princeton round number 1 to make a bunch of little dots all over the page. I've seen dots as a starting point as a suggestion a few times, and it was raining last week here in LA, and I had quite a nice time watching the raindrops fall on my balcony or when I was walking down the street. So this Zen Tangle is going to be inspired by that raindroppy ripple pattern. It's lots of very similar and repetitive strokes. They basically just get bigger and bigger. Toward the end of the piece, we'll have some interesting areas where they connect. But until now, just zone out and use this as a bit of a meditation. Typically, our starting point is a closed shape, and we can either begin by filling it in, or using the shape to trace the outsides, filling out the entire blank page, and then moving on to the negative space the shapes have created on the inside afterwards. Or we do a line which ultimately divides the page into sections as we go. We don't really have either of those options here, so we are trying something new. We started by doing about 3 to 5 different circles around each little dot. I chose to do this so each dot would have somewhat of a presence on the page once we looked at the bigger picture at the end. Also, kind of like the Japanese Zen garden one, they give our paintbrush something to hit, so to speak. So things are a little more interesting than just one line. Each time a hit happens, it gives us an opportunity to reset, or simply take on a new perspective, and notice what taking it on made us feel. Chances are high that it was not the end of the world. So to summarize, there's just a lot of opportunities for mindfulness. On select circles, we've started to do more than 3 to 5 lines, and are moving outward until we bump into something. As we do this all across the page until it completely fills up, think of my voice kind of as beach waves, in the background of whatever you're doing, but still gently adding to the vibes. I hope anyway. You may have noticed that we're using a smaller brush than usual. This is the number 1, and we usually use the number 2. It has a pointier end and a skinnier width when the bristles all spread out. This is my first Zentangle that exclusively uses a number 1. So we're kind of learning as we go along here, and I'm seeing that it seems to carry paint a little bit differently than the number 2. You'll notice that some areas are darker and some are lighter, which typically happens, but this variation seems much more intense to me. I'm also, for the most part, just using the point of the brush to get through little areas like this, but also because I started that way doing the dots when we first began, and I guess it kind of stuck. And I want a consistent feeling, so it's too late to change that. From this perspective, the dots and the circles are kind of looking like moss or lichen growing out of the page. Or maybe like something in a petri dish. Whatever it is, it's very open to interpretation. It definitely feels organic to me. As the shapes have been expanding outward, they have started to touch, and you'll see that now not all the lines we make are circles. This particular one we're working on has gone around 3 circles, and with this line we're currently working on is going to connect the 4 on the right. And you know what that means, a big funky negative space is loading. It's interesting to notice how they were all totally separate entities, and then with one little line they can completely transform. It shows that tiny decisions can often make a major change. Just something to note. Here we are coming up on another little circle that's going to be swallowed up into our major current shape. When the line is darker, that's because I would have just dipped the brush into the paint. By the way, we are using a Japanese watercolor or Gansai for this, which I love because I feel it has such a strong pigment, and I love colors. When the line starts to get lighter and lighter, that's because the pigment is running out on that particular line or segment. The paint has transferred from the brush and across the page, and soon it will be time to re-dip. Think of it like eating a delicious snack such as butter popcorn. You reach your hand into the bag, and it's filled with all that goodness. Pretty quickly, I assume, you start popping them into your mouth, and they disappear from your hand. They are now making their way down to your tummy. At this point, there is a very obvious next step, and that is to reach our hand back into the bag of popcorn and fill it up. And then we'll repeat that process happily until the end of the movie. Even though the spirals are quote-unquote never done, we've moved on to a different section. This is to ensure that whatever these shapes are, they're expanding outward pretty consistently across the page, which is not necessary, it's just the style I chose for this particular drawing, or painting. I still haven't decided what I want to call these. With each circle and line we create, we are following the contours of what was there before. So if there's a little dip or wiggle, we will follow it. Without judgment, of course, because we're not trying to create a page of perfect circles. We are trying to expand some organic shapes and see what happens on this fine morning. I like to paint best in the mornings. That shape on the left is starting to look like a pentagon. A very soft and cuddly pentagon, though. Very minimal sharpness going on over here. We are steadily approaching the point in the piece where there's going to be more painted area than blank area. When this happens, it's kind of like a seamless passing of the baton. I think that's the phrase. I'm sure there's multiple ways to say that actually, but I'm sure you catch my drift. Oh, or the changing of the guard. That is my preferred way to say it. So the white areas are off duty and they're giving way to this beautiful blue collection of lines, which are really looking like the cross-section of some trees. Maybe this is a forest from above, and we have some super special laser goggles to see what it would be like sliced horizontally. Maybe we also threw a bunch of little pebbles into a pond, and their energies are rippling outwards. And we are so tiny in this story I've made up that it's actually happening at this very peaceful little pace, whereas the humans see it happen in a few milliseconds, which is great for them, but even cooler for us. Here we are working on one of many very interesting negative shapes. An observation I'm about to make is absurdly niche, so if anyone actually knows what I'm talking about, you are my new best friend. Hope that's okay. But the negative spaces on this page, also known as the white areas, kind of look like Cassandra from Doctor Who, from an episode in around 2005. Kind of like a stretched out, inside out speech bubble for anyone who might not know what the heck I'm on about. Here we have some little ears poking out sideways from the edge of the page. From this angle, you can really see how thick the book is and how much more there is to go. Once we work our way through the blues, so into the lighter ones and then into purpley blues, lilac and then violet, and all the purples in between, we're then going to get into browns and more neutral tones, and then we have loads of space left in the book for all kinds of new creative ideas. Multiple colors, overlapping lines, maybe some op art, hypnotic, trippy stuff. It's going to be loads of fun. Maybe even different kinds of brushes. I know we've done a few sizes already, but even more variety. I definitely want to do some more with this number 1 brush, but spreading it out rather than just using the tip as we have been. So that'll be for sure coming soon. Watch this space. The page is now really looking like a beautiful pattern as it spreads out into the corners, and the white is completely on its way out. I mean, it'll still always exist, poking through the lines of the circles, but it's transformed in a way that we can't get back. Which was our intention, really, so that's cool. With this final negative space left to complete, it very much feels like a jigsaw puzzle. And it also feels like the circles are all expanding in and squeezing out the white. Kind of like lots of bubbles growing in a really foamy bathtub. This kind of connection gives us the opportunity to make some angular shapes, like this nice pillow that we're working on, as well as the triangle and the bikini bottom on its side below, or whatever it is that you see these things as. As usual, there is no right and no wrong. All interpretations are welcome and encouraged. I love to see what you think of these things. Sometimes when you say it, I think, oh my gosh, duh, crazy, I didn't see that. That's why I love perspective. It just expands the view. More things to notice and tickle our minds. On the theme of mind tickling, I hope that's how you felt throughout this video. It was a long one, so if you made it here, well done. And if you skipped, at least you wanted to see the outcome. I'll take it. We are now onto our last final bit, which is pretty smack in the center of the page, just because I thought it would be fun to watch it close up in that way. The bubbles are all grouping together into a big hug. Variations in opacity and the light and dark of the pigment. What's your favorite circle? I kind of like the ones that have grown off to the side of the page. We don't always get patterns like that. It's now time to gently wiggle your fingers and your toes and peacefully float back into reality. Tonight we're doing a shape that is highly requested and also just in time, because it's kind of getting springy over here, and that is snowflakes. In this nice pearlescent deep light blue, which sounds contradictory, but it's what we're using. We're going to start by drawing a bunch of different snowflakes all over our page, all smallish but varying in size a little bit. I feel like I talk about this all the time, but the best part of snowflakes is that they're all different. So this bit of the piece is a true playtime. We're just getting some shapes out there and seeing what happens. As I painted more, I started to notice what worked best. I like a mix of straight and curved lines, and then also alternating the patterns helps a lot. So doing 3 like these spikies, and then 3 with the dots at the top. It helps space things out and keep it more symmetrical. Forcing yourself to think of a different one each time is a fun little project. They don't have to be crazy different from each other, but having to squeeze the creativity out can sometimes be the start of the best ideas that you might not have got to had you not needed to. Once we have a bunch of snowflakes all over the page, we're going to start phase 2, which is our first level of Zen tangling. One by one, we're going to trace around the outside of each of the snowflakes, creating a single line to encapsulate their shape, kind of like putting them in a specially formed bubble. We're going to focus on following the outline as exactly as we can. Because we're using one single all the way around line, as opposed to a center with a bunch of lines sticking out like the snowflakes themselves were, for the most part, there's also a few little circles on the page, we're going to get a very different kind of shape with the outline. But it's almost like a cousin to what's inside it, or its echo. Just like how each snowflake was different, each outline bubble is going to be different too. Some are going to be spikier while others will be rounder. Here we have a cute little spiky guy. Pretty simple and also pretty symmetrical. Whereas this one here to the left is going to be much more round, because we're going to trace our brush along the edges of these circles. It's kind of looking like a Burger King crown at this point. Once we start to draw more echo lines around our snowflakes, things are going to get interesting, because these rounded shapes are going to intersect with the pointy shapes, and make interesting little shapes in between, at least I predict. For now, we still need to make our way across the page, leaving no snowflake unencapsulated. It's kind of like making each of them have an invisibility cloak. This is a perfect place to get lost in the meditation of it all, focusing solely on the exact line we're working on, where the brush tip touches down on the page and moves around the shape. It's the kind of thing that seems mundane with the first few glances, but there's actually a lot of difference happening. If, of course, you take the time to slow down and notice. The line we've been working on right now is super pigmented. It's pretty dark compared to the others. That's because there was a higher concentration of paint to water. That was not intentional. Every few strokes, I dip my brush into the paint and water mixture I've created, re-upping the juice for this piece, so to speak. The ratio of pigment to water can vary with each of these times. Also, when you first put the brush down on the page, it has a lot more pigment and water on it. And with the lines we do, that moves from the brush to the paper, which means the brush and lines lose water as we go around. So if there are a lot of short strokes, it's more likely that the paint is going to be darker. And if we are able to get a long stroke out of our re-up on the brush, it will lighten out as the line goes on. That's one type of variation to notice. Another is line thickness. This is a round style of brush. What this means is that the tip comes to a very crisp point at the end of the bristles. Another classic brush you might have seen is a flat one, where all the bristles are in the same square or rectangle shape. That's great for filling things in, but effectively we're really drawing here. So it's nice to have the point with a versatility option. The versatility comes in depending on how much of the bristles are on the page at a time. The more bristles, the thicker the line, because there's a higher surface area of bristles on the paper, which means more water and paint can transfer onto it. The opposite happens when we're more gentle with our brush, using just the point. Only a little bit of it is touching the paper, so only a little bit of the paint is going to go on it, and that's how we get really thin lines. As the brush is moving around the shapes, drawing the echo lines, sometimes it has pretty straight expanses to cover, and other times it needs to dive into little crevices or corners. With the latter, I often use the point or tip of the brush. I feel I can get more control. And I can always add more paint to the section, but I can't take it away. So when you're trying to be careful, that's probably the best method. We've now done at least our first echo line or two around every snowflake on the page, and we're now echo lining these lines with the same method. So using a single line to trace around the shape that's there, effectively creating a new shape. Again, it has the essence of what's below it or inside of it, but it's a softer or less pronounced version. That's because with each layer there are less crevices and corners. We're kind of fattening it up and just taking the essence. While the shape of our snowflakes expand and get softer, the negative space, so the white page, is shrinking and growing more corners. It's kind of a yin-yang. Another interesting thing to notice and pay attention to is how the white space on the page transforms with each round. At one point, it was a lot of the page. At the start, it was all of the page. But by now it's really shrinking as the blue grows. The shapes have grown so much that they're now starting to bump into each other. This little circle we're working on, and this snowflake, have come so close to each other that doing the line around one is also the line around the other. Same with this funky one with the hexagon center that we're working on right now. As we move the line around, it's going to swallow up this snowflake right above it. And it can squeeze past that little circle on the right, but the next round will not make it. So the negative space under the corner of that star and the circle is going to be kind of a little cavern for the paintbrush to go in and then back out of. I like to think of the life of the paintbrush in these pieces as exploring and on an adventure. The more it fearlessly charts out into the page, the more new areas it's able to discover. It kind of has to create a bridge for itself to get out into those areas, though. And that's one of the purposes that all of these lines serve. That's if you're thinking of the paintbrush as the main character. Out here, center stage and telling us a story as it goes. From another perspective, the snowflakes could be the main character. They started out small and not in a high number, but they gained power and confidence and grew until they completely take over the page. Plot twist. You could also see the page itself as the main character, of course. That's what we started with, blank and ready for paint. And it's in control of what happens on top of it. And regardless of what that is, you can't take away that the page is there. We can see it through all our lines, and it's supporting everyone else. It's definitely more of an introvert main character. The other two are more extroverted main characters, I'd say. Then, of course, the fourth character is the paint itself. Easily manipulated and taken to places we don't know if it really wants to go. But by this point, it's really turned into something beautiful. And visually is telling a lot of the story. It all comes down to perspective, I guess. By this point, a lot of the snowflakes have expanded to the point where they are growing into each other, connected by the lines that circle them. It's interesting how the original snowflake shapes themselves don't seem so prominent anymore. That's because this kind of Zentangle isn't about each individual detail. I find them more about the process of slowing down and noticing small things, and of course the final look, which is less important than the process, but obviously still important because that's what we see at the end. The point is, if you get too caught up in the little details and how one line might not look exactly right, yada yada yada, you're missing the point of the piece, which is to just let our minds wander. Like the little brush charting its way. Here we are going into that cavern we talked about earlier. So the brush has moved along the right side of this negative space, is coming back around, and then going out the left. As we do that, the lines have come really close together and we've created 2 negative spaces. Now 3, actually. And we're going to fill them in one by one. Or not. I actually think I might leave a lot of negative space in this piece. It reminds me of frozen crystals growing. And I like how they organically stop. They don't always completely cover the area they've been in. I like to have a little variety in my pieces, and I don't think I've done one like this in this book. So we're not going to fill everything in. It's also kind of like how when snow falls, it's rarely a perfect line. Might be covering a bush, so it's more lumpy on one side, or fall down a hole, so there's a bit of a divot somewhere else. And one area isn't necessarily better than another area. We kind of just look at the snow as a whole and say, wow, look at this nice blanket over the earth today. And then we remember that that blanket is actually made up of millions of teeny tiny little snowflakes, and that each one is different. How dope. So kind of exactly like this piece. Each line and little bit is so interesting to pay attention to, but also it all works together as one nice little painting on a page. We're going to have a nice little brain nap today where your mind can drift off into the clouds, because that is what we'll be painting, using a soft and gentle light blue. We're going to start by drawing cloud shapes all over our page. We're starting at the top and making them really big and fluffy. The perfect objects to lie on and float into dreamland. As we move toward the bottom of the page, or the bottom of the sky, the clouds are flattening out a little bit, as they do at horizon level. We're going to Zentangle this page in a way that we haven't actually done before. We started in the bottom left corner and made our way up the left side of the page. Once our line reached the cloud, we carried it on along the puffs, tracing the contours of its shape. That took us back to the left side of the page, where we're going to continue our line all the way until the top. Once we hit the corner, we are pivoting, and using the edge of the page as the boundary for this painting, sealing all of the nice dreams into this cozy rectangle. We've moved around the next corner, and have again bumped into a very fluffy cloud. Our brush is going to dance along the ripples of its outline, tracing its shape as cleanly and delicately as we can, until we find ourselves back at the edge of the page, this time on the right side, where we trace along the edge of the page again until we get to our little cloud at the bottom. All the bumps and the edges of the clouds make for a nice rhythmical path for our brush. Now that we've made it down to the horizon, we are completing the last edge of the page, and connecting this big line that we've just made. For the rest of this Zentangle, we're going to focus on closing in the boundary box we've created. Starting in the same original corner, our brush has floated up until it's reached the cozy cloud. Once it's there, it's going to follow the line we most recently made all the way around, over the little hills and into crevices whenever we get to them. From one perspective, we're expanding the shape of the cloud, and from another, we're filling in the blue of the sky. Both those realities are existing at the same time, and you can see it in whatever way it makes you feel more peaceful. We're going to keep lolloping around these shapes, and imagine the chaos of our mind is the blank of the page below where we're watercoloring with the blue. Slowly but surely, and of course gently, we are making it disappear, and instead replacing it with nice, calm feelings. And hopefully not even thinking of anything, just feeling soothed by this mini attention span rehab. As the cloud echoes have grown larger, we've started to create some negative spaces within the painting. In just a few lines, the horizon is almost already completely filled in. So we're going to dance our brush through these little mountains and close it out. We have found ourselves at another closed-in space, caused by the meeting of these three clouds. Starting in the top corner, we're going to trace an outline around this shape that's been made. It's interesting to notice how it's kind of the yin to the yang of the clouds. If we look at it as its own shape, as opposed to a negative space, the lollips go inward as opposed to outward, and it has a much spikier feeling. With every line we do to close it out, the shape not only shrinks, but also transforms. It's looking a little different as new angles are formed. And it's starting to give us a glimpse at what things will look like when the sky is totally filled in. It kind of feels like we're looking down into a time machine or one of those old vintage cameras. And remember that with each line that takes over the white area, our sleepiness is closing in on the chaos of our brains. The day is done, we did great, and we now have full permission to relax. If we zoom out, we'll see we've made great headway on our page. We're now filling in the top half of the rectangle, tracing our way along the edge and then the top, until we meet our fluffiest cloud in the top center of the page. We'll then use this cloud as the new guide for our brush, and slip along its edges, expanding the coverage of the sky and filling in the hollow spaces of our brain with something gentle, safe, and comforting. This pretty light blue is a cozy shade. It evokes feelings of tranquility and peace, which is exactly what we welcome as we get ready to fall asleep. We want to fall into a deep state of rest where we can recharge and be prepared for tomorrow. And we'll get this little corner and all its bits along the way. Now that spring is here, it's time to leave anything dusty and frozen in the past. We don't need to take everything into this time. Spring is light and serene, like little bunnies hopping around a meadow or petals floating around in the breeze. Sometimes the best way to get through our to-do list is to remove those cobwebby items that we don't actually have to get done. Everything we're taking on with us tomorrow when we get out of bed is going to be fresh, exciting, and good for us. Enjoy this last view of the clouds in white because we're going to start filling them in. We're going to Zentangle some inlines just the same way we did the outlines, tracing around the entirety of the shape, down hills, up to points, including using the edge of the page. We're going to use it to seal up the edge of this cloud. Now we have a completely protected shape that we're going to work on the inside of. We don't need to worry about where the lines will go. We just seamlessly follow the path that's laid out for us, dancing around until we get to the starting point of our line. Once we've closed it up, the hug of this cloud gets tighter and we do the same thing again. With each line, the shape of the cloud transforms, just like it did with the outside bits too. We're going to start creating pointed edges, and now this cloud kind of looks like a flying bird. We're not trying to paint anything specific. We are effortlessly using our previous lines as a guide for this process. Our cloud-turned-bird has now kind of turned into fish. When you're dreaming, nothing really makes sense, and it doesn't need to. So don't worry about attaching sense to anything for the rest of this page. We're just over here making patterns, calming down, and welcoming in the soft, heavy feeling of sleepy. Even the most powerful, successful, life-changing people you'll ever meet or come across in life need their sleep. Every single night. We have so much going on and so many thoughts running through our little minds all day long. Let's let our blanket be our hug. Our bodies are the original shape of the clouds that we drew at the start, and our blanket is that first outline, cozily covering all the contours of our body, making it warm and secure. As we fill in the inside of the clouds, that's what's happening inside our bodies. Any emptiness or confusion is becoming connected with our paintbrush, As we drag our little brush around this curve, we have one more cloud to complete. It's the final piece of the puzzle, and it's what brings the whole painting together to become one beautiful page of intricacies, comfort, and, of course, gratitude. This cloud shape is kind of transforming into a chunky little butterfly, or a little ghost that's saying boo with their arms outstretched. But it's honestly the furthest thing from frightening because it's so cute. In these last few moments, pay attention to your breathing. Think of welcoming in the sleep with every deep inhale, and letting go of the stale day with every exhale. Everything inside your body now is on your team, and you're all working together to have a restful night. And if you watch this during the day, thank you for sticking around. A little brain nap is always a good idea. So let's close out this cute little cloud that's kind of looking like an animal of some sort. And then we'll get a nice view of the full finished painting. And then you can either head back to your day feeling a little refreshed, hopefully, or fall deep into a cozy, well-deserved sleep. This has to be the biggest compliment of my life. I love both of these things so much. Thank you. Today you are watching the long, slow voice version of these flowers. I tried cutting the video down as much as I could, but I really liked a lot of these strokes, so it's almost 10 minutes. So now is really the time to get up and brush your teeth. I will be there with you. As usual, we're using Japanese watercolor in this beautiful periwinkle shade. And we are using my number 2 round brush from Princeton, which is also my usual brush. L'Amélie Paris handmade paper, you know the gist. We started by doing these happy bouncy flower shapes all over the page. One of my favorite things about the Princeton round number 2 brush that we're using is it's super versatile. You can use the tip for pointy edges and also spread out the bristles to get thicker marks. These flowers are a great shape to make the most of both of those things. As we come into the corner of each petal, I am gently lifting the brush. This means there are less bristles on the paper and just the point is touching, which makes the line thinner. As I move out of the corner, I then press the brush back down on the page, spreading out the bristles and making the line thicker. And as you can see, what we've been doing now is just this round and round each flower, in the same way that I made the flowers originally. It doesn't get quite as pointy as those inside lines because there isn't as much space to do so. And what we're doing with this ring around the flowers is tracing the lines we have down before. So we're not trying to make a repeat flower shape, we're just trying to zone out and follow the lines we have down. So after the initial round of flower outlines, we're just going to see whatever is on the page as arbitrary lines. Our brain might say, those are nice flowers, but our brush is feeling very calm and being one-track minded. All it cares about is following the previous contours of the lines exactly. And we're going to keep doing this, moving outward on all the shapes we've made until the page is completely filled up. Then we're going to go ahead and do the same on the insides of the flowers. But we're not there yet. We still have lots more spaces to fill in. You might notice that these strokes are a little thicker than what I usually do with the Princeton round number 2, which rhymes. That's because I'm being very intentional about spreading out the bristles, whereas I don't always put so much pressure down on the brush. Not pressure as in emotional pressure. There's actually none of that allowed right now, but physical pressure. The more you press down on the brush, the more mark you're going to get. So as we've been doing these lines, the ripples of the flowers start to bump into each other. And we're just going to keep pulling our line along whatever shape happens to be made, which pretty soon has become a bunch of flower combos. This line we're working on right now has actually been quite long if you stretched it out. As we go about this process, we get all kinds of fun negative shapes happening. Again, a little potential word confusion here. Not negative as in sad or bad, but negative as in not the pigmented area. Effectively, it's the background, or just not the focus of the piece. However, I always think negative space is so important to a piece, though. But it's just the term artists use for that kind of area. As we fill in these spaces, they're going to be negative spaces no more. This particular pattern of bubbly flowers is giving us a lot of Cassandras again. Ever since I spotted that on the raindrop dot piece, I cannot unsee it. Moisturize me. Anyways, these negative spaces are kind of fun because they're almost the opposite of what the flowers look like. Notice that the flowers themselves are negative space too at this point, because they're blank. They kind of look like thought bubbles, with very round and heavy edge bits, while this negative space we're currently working on looks like a speech bubble, particularly of someone yelling or shouting, I think, or maybe it would have bang in the middle, something like that. Although not for long, because we are filling it in pretty swiftly over here. With each line, we're just paying attention to the line that was before it. So our next line echoes the shape, but also transforms it into something a bit different. The speed at which this happens really depends on two things. One, how thick the lines are, and two, how much space is between the lines, which is similar, but different. They're similar in that both a thick line and a big space between mean the line is further away from the previous line, and the larger distance means a bigger difference. Kinda like when you have a lot of distance from a person. Sad. On the other hand, when the line is thinner, also like the lines in the raindrop piece where I used a number 1 brush and just the point of it so they were very thin. And when the lines are closer to the previous line, there's less distance. So the echo line is more similar and accurate. Accurate to the shape of what was before. There's no right or wrong in whether your lines are closer together or further apart, or thicker or thinner. They're all just different, and that is cool. I like to have a little bit of a different combo of these 4 variables throughout my Zentangles. Just for diversity, because I find that more fun. If you do the same thing, different font every single time, it can get a little stale. Not cute. We are always team diversity over here. You might notice I got a little excited and I have started filling in this flower, before I have quite finished all the negative spaces on the outsides of the flowers. I simply could not resist, and I'm not even sorry. What's going to be very fun about filling these in is that the flowers were handmade. Obviously, I did them just a few moments ago. So the dimensions of each petal are a bit different. They may have looked exact and perfect, but it's important to note that they're not. And that's okay because it adds some intrigue to the piece. Also, the Zentangling inlines we do within the flowers are all different as well. Different thicknesses, distance from the previous line, etc. So that shrinks the petals inwards at different rates, causing these interesting bikini bottom looking flowers. And then all these fun little negative spaces that feel like filling in the last puzzle piece when I do them. Let's take a step back and see how far we've come. This is a great place to notice the difference between a flower that's filled in and one that's not. I'm sure a bunch of people would have preferred me to not fill in the flowers. But I will be filling them all in because I'm very excited to do that. I came here to paint and find my Zen time, and I also want to explore how the different shapes happen within the flowers, like we were just talking about. But if you do this specific design, you don't have to fill yours in. When you are the artist, you make the rules. Unless it's a commission, of course, but that's a conversation for another time. Do you remember the yellow stars piece? It's pinned on my page and in this Zentangle playlist if you haven't seen it. Anyways, that had a really similar fill-in-the-shape effect. All the 5 points of each star were slightly different, so when we started filling them in, different shapes happened. And a lot of them ended up looking like shooting stars, which I thought was really cool. Obviously, the way my brain works, I was pretty sure that was the universe saying, this was the right kind of picture to do. Here's a little reward for you. Some shooting stars in your stars. Thank you. Once the flower shapes shrink, we get these kind of raindrop shapes that we need to fill in. Instead of dragging the brush along the paper and making a kind of line as we've been doing, I've been drawing them with the tip of my brush. This gives me more precision, and at this particular point in the piece, helps me echo the previous area better. What part of the brush we use, tip or side, also depends on the angle of my hand at the time. You'll notice I often start and stop at different points in the flowers, and that's because before each stroke, I change the position of my wrist. I put it somewhere where I'll get the maximum stroke. Especially with a rounded shape that's so in and out like these flowers, that shifts a lot. If you want to know more about how my hand shifts, I have lots of no-cuts videos of these on YouTube. And you can see all the mechanics behind these lines and all that. Isn't it cute that this particular flower has a freckle? I actually have a few of this exact round number 2 brush. With a lot of use, the bristles spread out ever so slightly. So while my brushes were all originally the same, they're now a touch different, and they can make different marks. This is my most used one. I'm most familiar with it, which is how I get the best control. It's my favorite tool, so to speak. And it can spread out the widest of all the ones that I have. It's kind of like a pair of jeans you've had for a while that just fits so good. You're probably going to still add new jeans to your wardrobe, but there's always that pair that you'll never get rid of because nothing does it like them. They're comfortable, and that's how I feel about this particular brush. I think I'm going to do a video soon of different watercolor techniques. So how much or little pressure to apply to the brush to get different kinds of strokes, like the pointy corners and the wide edges. How much water to use to get different looks, and all of those kind of things. I feel like I get questions on those a lot, so let's just get them all out on the page, shall we? Let me know if you'd prefer to see that in depth on YouTube or as a shorter form here on TikTok. I am not sure what would be more helpful. We are coming close to the end on our groovy flower painting. This negative space flower at the corner of the page kind of looks like someone took a big chomp out of the paper. Which honestly I find relatable because the textures just feel delicious. Not in a weird way, but you know what I mean? To full circle it, kind of like chewing on Polly Pocket clothes. If you know, you know. Anyways, it's time to gently wiggle your toes and wiggle your fingers and float back into reality. Sad, I know, but it's okay. We'll hang out again soon, I promise. Welcome back to another page in my Zentangle book. I can't seem to find the comment, but someone had the absolutely brilliant idea of doing light pink bunnies, so enter that. Starting off in the top left corner with a little bunny who's lolloping into a leap. This isn't quite light pink, it's actually a light lilac. We're up to the purples in the book, and this fit perfectly, so I thought it would work. So what's happening is phase 1 of our Zentangle, where we're sprinkling a bunch of little bunny outlines all over the page. We're going to do all kinds of different shapes with the intention of adding some intrigue to our Zentangle. This one here is an angry little bunny, look at that. The more curves and swoops and corners and divots, the more opportunity the Zentangle will have to dance around these shapes. As usual, when I do animals in this book, I'm not going to add eyes. If you want to add eyes, you can do your own bunny Zentangle. I love painting around soft and gentle curves when I'm Zentangling. So bunnies are the perfect little animal because they have those round bellies, delicate little paws, and a set of big puffy ears. We have a side view of this one right here, who is sitting down and rubbing its little nose. We're going to extend her ears all the way into the center of the page. Then we're going to fill in this gap on the bottom left by doing another set of ears on a bunny who isn't quite featured. After adding a couple details, it's time to Zentangle. So starting wherever we like, we're going to trace a line around the shapes that we already have on the page. We're going to remove our focus from the bunny element. Instead, we just want to see the lines that we have down as the boundary we're going to paint around. So we're not trying to make a larger bunny shape, although it usually does look like it with this first level. It also kind of looks like a sticker with the outline. But as we outline each and every little bunny, the lines are going to start colliding and we're going to do new paths with our line. And they won't make sense or be any sort of shape at all. They'll just be a route by which our brains can zen out and have some playtime. I know many of us refer to this as a brain nap, or even as attention span rehab. So let's use these next few moments to feel those ways. As our lilac line glides along the bellies of the bunnies, imagine it covering the inside of your brain with a blanket of this color. It is a soft, warm, cozy blanket, and it's going to protect us from any unwanted thoughts. All we need to worry about is how this line is dancing around this angry little bunny here and all of her bunny friends. This bunny is 100% giving Parmesan, by the way. The bunny facing us, so the one below the one we're working on right now, is giving Ryan. I always say that he's a mixture of a bunny and a whale, so that makes sense. As you can see, we've now come to our second Zentangle line. And since the bunnies are large and take up a big amount of the page, it means the shapes have started to collide. So this line isn't going to just trace the outline of one bunny, but it's able to pick up multiple as it moves around the page. With every line, the negative space or the background behind the bunnies really changes. We're actually going to preserve the bunnies as negative space as well on this one. How many people had wished I'd done to the clouds? Once you get to the end, let me know if you think I should fill the bunnies in or if I should leave them as is, because I can't decide. I like how this piece has a lot of different shapes in the intrigue we talked about before, but that many of them are gentle and swoopy and undulating round like this line we're doing right here. Each line kind of feels like another layer of a hug. And if you know me, you know I love hugs. Solicited hugs, of course. not trying to hug a random person unless they're particularly sexy. This current line we're working on is going to be the piece that closes in this very cool negative shape we have right here. It kind of looks like a purple malachite. I know you see malachite in a lot of my other pieces, and I do too. I love when you mention seeing a shape in these that I hadn't seen myself. It goes to show the power of art, not to be cliché, but the way it brings so many people together. Because we could all look at the same piece and see something a little different. I think that subconscious analysis pulls out of us what we really want to see. For example, the same piece could make someone else happy and someone else angry. And I just think that's kind of telling. Something fun to pay attention to. How does this piece make you feel? It makes me feel like eating a cupcake, to be honest. Let's close out this little malachite area. Soon there are going to be lots of little negative spaces as the left and right sides come closer together. I'm going to be extremely sad on Saturday if TikTok actually gets banned again. I know we don't really believe it this time because this isn't the first time, and here we are. But I kind of have a bad feeling about it. I don't know about you, but I will still be making Zentangles, of course, my favorite offline activity. If you want to keep seeing them, please subscribe to me on YouTube and follow me on Instagram. That's where I'll be posting, and I'm also open to further suggestions if you have any. Our lilac filling has gently moved across the page from left to right, kind of like a slow sunrise. This current line we're working on is going to divide the rest of the negative space into a couple little areas that we can then tackle one by one. So we're slowly but surely going to fill in this little mountain. Maybe it's a volcano, maybe it's something in between. Notice how with each layer, the image of the negative space transforms slightly. We can appreciate each silhouette without having to hold on to it. The art of letting go, am I right? I'm not really ready to let go of TikTok, I'm quite sad. But stick with me, the other platforms are in my bio. And let me know if I should fill in the bunnies. For today's little attention span rehab brain nap, we're going to be using Magic Purple, which has to be one of the prettiest colors in the whole world to me. We're going to start with a simple wavy line that goes from one side of the page to the other. With every 2 lines, we're going to change our brush. So the lines are going to get thicker as we move across the piece. It's an ombre or gradient of size as opposed to one of color. What we're doing with every line is following the contours of what was there before. So we're trying to pull the wavy line we had down throughout the page and dragging its essence all over the piece. We're paying attention to all the little grooves and curves that happen, whether on purpose or not, and whatever shape they are is going to be reflected in our next line, which will ripple into the line after, and so on until the page is completely full of this magic purple. The only thing we need to worry about is the current line that we're working on, how it wraps around the bends of the previous line, and how it sticks to it in all places like a little shadow. With each new layer, things are going to look a little different. That's because the size of the brush increases, of course, which changes how the line looks. We're now onto the Princeton round number 2, which is the brush I usually use for these things, but also because the angles, curves, and points are going to change. This angle here becomes smaller and smaller the more closed in it gets with each line. So the beauty of this exercise is that we can't dictate the outcome too much. We also don't know how things are going to turn out because we don't know where exactly we're going to wiggle and move the paint, which means we can't really predict the outcome, which means we are not attached to the outcome, which means we can't be disappointed. We can just be really excited by this beautiful shimmery purple that's looking lovely in the morning light in my studio. The thicker the line, obviously the more of the page it's going to take up. So we really didn't need very many to close out this part of the page. Now that it's done, we're flipping the paper upside down and going through the other side. Again, switching our brush out to a larger size with every 2 lines we go. This half is kind of the inverse of what we did before. So it's going to be interesting to notice how different or similar they are. Look how nice the light catches it from this angle. I feel like if I knew spells, I would put them in this book. I would decorate each page with a different colored shimmery paint, and a pattern maybe pertaining to something to do with the spell. So a love spell could be pink hearts, of course. And then I would write the spell on top in black ink. Then I would close the book and keep it somewhere very secret. But alas, all I really know how to do is look up someone's birth chart. As the lines have progressed, one of our curves has turned into a really pretty set of points. And we're using the tip of this brush to get up in there and make those edges really crisp. What do you think of the alternating brush sizes? Should we do more of these? I quite like how it turned out. and I think I will sit here and stare at it for a lot of the rest of the day because it's so shiny. And I just love sparkly, pretty, shimmery things. Welcome back to Attention Span Rehab, where today we're using Shade Crocus from Lena Bean's studio, and we're going to draw a bunch of little paws all over this page of handmade paper. Starting with the little triangular pad in the middle and adding 4 toe beans on top. I've started with one in the middle to give us the best balance of all 4 and be as symmetrical as possible. And we're going to keep painting these as the base for our Zentangle. These shapes will be our starting point that we work around. They don't need to be perfect, they just need to be sweet. I of course think these are kitten paws. I just fostered 2 new kittens, if you didn't know, Raindrop and Drop Top. I'll show you them later. However, these can be any paws you'd like to imagine. You can even assign a paw to your pet, just the same way you can adopt a star. Although, this way you don't need to spend hundreds of dollars. You can just comment which paw in your pet's name and I'll say, you got it. As I paint this, we're going to give our brains a little break. There is so much going on in the world, on this day, in this hour, even in this minute. Let's just slow down and tune out any unhelpful noise. Whether that's background television, someone yapping about something you really don't care about at all, or your own thoughts constantly tapping on the inside of your head. Throughout this video, we're not going to listen to them. At the end, you can invite them back in if you'd like to, but hopefully you don't want to. We can't get rid of thoughts forever, but we can give ourselves breaks. I don't know about you, but if I haven't had a break in a while, I will explode. And that's uncomfortable. We've created the first outline on one of our paws and are now moving on to the second one. We're going to spend the next few moments gently tracing around each one until every paw has turned into a bubble. We're smoothly making our way around each toe bean, down into the crevice of toe beans if we can fit, if not we'll come back to it later, and back around the next toe bean until we're taken to the main padding of the paw. Our brush is careful to follow all the undulations that are happening, dropping and then rising again with every curve, until we meet back up with the start of this line, and we enclose our paw into a bubble. These paws are really nice shapes to dance around because they have these rounded bits, as well as these tiny little corners we can dip into. And each one is a little bit different. Maybe they're each different animals. Well, they are because they're your guys' pets. And I can't imagine you all have the same pet. Each one is unique and so sweet and so soft. I think that's my favorite thing about my pets, is that they're so soft. Here we are making our way into a cranny to complete this paw. I like to pretend that my brush and the previous line are connected by an invisible force that keeps them very consistently just half a little centimeter from each other. At least I think this is half a centimeter. I haven't done math in a very long time, which is one of my favorite things about 2025. I owe you an update on my thoughts on the ban. Obviously we are still here due to an extension. Woohoo! However, I'm really not a fan of the whole stop and start, confusion and worry. I find that type of fear-mongering hard to respect. There are other platforms where I'm seeing a little more consistency, and unfortunately here my views have dropped dramatically. Which, on one hand, is whatever. As you know, I do these for myself to clear my mind. But on the other hand, TikTok's been really helpful for my business. I'm able to make so many of these videos for you guys because they're monetized. So that gives me the freedom to be able to spend time on them. To put in the same amount of work and get less than a quarter of the results that I'd been getting, unfortunately just doesn't make sense. I'm currently working on a new strategy and will update you as soon as I have it. For now, I'll still be posting here, but those are my thoughts. I also wonder if I got shadow banned because my videos encourage people to stop scrolling. I do fear that might be happening. But it's okay, we're not going to let this stress us out. For now, we're just going to keep watching these paw prints grow and expand out into the page. Every bubble line we do around the paw is basically a ripple effect. So it has the echo and essence of our original paw, but the shape becomes much gentler as we go outward. And as it swims its way around the curves of the paw, it's going to start coming in contact with other paws. I like how paws, P-A-W-S, sounds like pause, P-A-U-S-E. Because that's what we're all doing together right now, a little pause. Now that our line is taking us all over the page as the paws start to collide, we can really get lost in the process. Turn off our brains and just watch the paint melt into the paper and create some cute little curves and little points, and then little curves again, and then little point. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that for the whole thing. Because the paws were placed randomly and are at different angles, we're going to get a bunch of very interesting little crevices around here, like the one we just painted our way out of. It kind of feels like a little kitten just skedaddled over a light layer of water. And there's ripples coming out of her paw prints. Raindrop and Drop Top are girls, by the way, if anyone was wondering. At this point in the piece, we can start to see the paint or the purple overtaking the white. The white, which was the overwhelming majority, is shrinking. However, it's going to remain in the paws. P-A-W-S. Let me know if you think I should fill in the paws or if I should leave them blank, because I have not decided yet. I know there was some commotion on the cloud piece because I'd filled those in, so I'm curious to see what the majority says here. Originally, it also kind of looked like little paw prints in snow as well. We're coming upon some really interesting negative shapes with the way our lines are going. This one here kind of looks like a cartoon pair of pants, and we're going to fill them in with some gentle little curved lines until there's just 2 little triangles left that we will also fill in. I don't know if we've made a Zentangle with complex interiors quite like this before. They're so fun to fill in because it's so unexpected what they turn into. There's no way we could have planned this crunchy bunny looking shape. That's why these kind of paintings are so good for the brain. Aside from selecting our initial shape and maybe how thick or thin our brush is, there isn't really a way to control specifically how things are going to turn out on the page. We just have to go with the flow and choose to be pleased with whatever happens. I didn't wake up this morning and decide I was going to get really excited by a tiny little purple triangle on my paper. That would be odd. But I can choose to see these little purple triangles and think that they're very sweet and be grateful that I got to see them. Let's pretend our brains are radios and tune them to a frequency of appreciation. Before we tune it, we might look at those little purple triangles and say, "What a stupid little purple triangle." After we tune it, we can say, "Oh look, a cute purple little triangle." In either situation, we go about the rest of our day pretty normally. That little purple triangle isn't going to dramatically change much for us. What does change is our attitude, and thus how we write our day going. Would you rather collect little reasons to be upset? 'Cause those compound and get heavy. Or would you rather slide through the day seamlessly, maybe noticing little things along the way? If you're going to carry something, you may as well make it worth it. How many little purple triangles can you see in this frame? I can see at least 9, which is my favorite number. There's another one we just filled in. We're now left with 2 blank spaces on the page, and after bopping around the echoes of these toe beans, this one is about to be filled in. This bit here kind of looks like the tilted head of a slug or a little alien. And would you look at that? We're now making a little purple triangle. Take a shot every time Lizzie says purple triangle, or just appreciate how pretty this purple paint is. Thanks for painting with me.